Hello and welcome back to another Skyrim Archaeological survey. This week, as ever, I am joined by the incredible Liv. Hello, Liv.
Hello.
Hello. And together we are going to be doing something a wee bit different. We are going to be watching a documentary together called The Making of Elder Scrolls Skyrim, um, Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, rather, which I believe was released in some form with the game. It certainly made its way onto YouTube, and crucially, I'm particularly excited because we finally found a way to watch this thing together, as opposed to one of us
Yay.
sort of screen sharing and not being able to hear it if you're on the other end of that screen share on Skype, or having to keep track of time codes if
Mm.
each of you are watching it independently. This thing, if I play it, press play and pause, you see it play and pause. It's brilliant. And we've tried a few websites in the past half hour or so, haven't we, to get this
Mm-hmm.
this this working? And I'm so happy with this. I'm going to share the URL for the website in the video description below. So yeah, if you want to do this sort of thing, that's how we have figured is the best way to do it. It's called watchtogether.com. Uh, but anyway, we're going to be watching this because part of our ongoing Skyrim archaeological survey has been, uh, I suppose, butting up against a little bit of a truism, and that is the fact that these are designed things. This is a designed
Mm-hmm.
world, and this is part of archaeology gaming, or gaming as an archaeologist, is to accept that the game itself is an artifact. It's a cultural artifact, and it's been made by human beings. And this was actually, it was inspired by a blog post from Joel Burgess. He wrote this seemingly back in, well, based on a presentation he gave back in 2013, where he was reflecting on Skyrim's modular approach to level design.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, here, I mean, it's a really interesting post, but in particular, here, for example, we have the full scope of people who worked on Skyrim, which actually is quite a small number of people anyway. It's only 100 or so people, or 90 people, but only 10 of those people are directly responsible for all of the dungeons that are found in Skyrim. 300 plus dungeons spread out over a 16 square mile overworld. 300 dungeons made by 10 people. And not all of those people were actually plugging the dungeons together. There would have been art assets being designed, there would have been AI and other things going into the way that the dungeons worked and mechanisms. It's interesting to me, definitely, that so few people could
Mm-hmm.
achieve that. I mean, do you think that this is in some way not surprising? Because I mean, I don't know about you, Liv, but it sort of reminds me of the way that a dungeon master, pun intended, I suppose, would figure out a campaign in a pen and paper RPG. You know, you reuse
Yeah.
assets and plug together rooms and monsters and
I
this
mean,
kind of thing.
that's surely how I do it. I mean, I would never like reinvent the dungeon
Mm,
every time I was DMing,
mm.
just because, like, if you have a functional module, then that's way quicker.
Yeah, no, exactly. And also, it just makes sense to draw on what works well as well. So
Yeah.
I haven't. I think I watched this documentary years ago, but I'm happy to rewatch it today. And let's press play.
Yay.
Yay! Is it playing for
We're
you?
obviously
Mm-hmm. It's
big
Yay!
playing.
fans of the Elder
Todd
Scrolls
Howard.
ourselves.
Play
These are the kind
Todd.
of games that we would be playing if we weren't here making them.
This is the whole important part. This is the frothing, or as we say here, making a potion.
How we make potions in Skyrim.
There are about 30 or 40 of us. We've been together for over 10 years at Bethesda Game Studios. These are the same leads that were working on Morrowind, Oblivion, and this is their third Elder
This
Scrolls
was
game,
back in the day
Skyrim.
before they lost their way,
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't
seemingly.
a question of whether we were going to do a fifth one. It was more, what did we want it to be? How is it going to be different?
Skyrim is sort of this culmination of over a decade's worth of making open world RPGs, and we're trying to take everything that we've learned and focus it onto this one game.
You're the leader of the rebellion.
I thought it was weird when he said, "You're the leader of the rebellion." Like, is it just because it's a robo voice?
It sort of starts like with a kernel of ideas that Todd has, and a couple of the key people who've been here for a long time worked on all the Elder Scrolls. So we sort of know like after the previous game, what was the feedback, or what was that game? Then where is this game set? What do we want to do different? What do we want to improve upon?
Of course, Dave, if you ever want to pause this, feel free to take
I
control.
will.
That's
Yeah.
usually where you start.
One of the reasons why we did
'Cause we
Skyrim is
can.
it has more developed lore than some of the other places. We've written more about it. There's been more references.
You know,
in
I'm
books.
just
So we knew
geeking
more
out
about
a
it. We had
bit,
more of a starting
watching
place,
a
and it was
game
also-
studio.
We thought it was cool.
Well, actually, I
What
suppose
is the
I'll just pause
tone
it for a
of the
second.
game?
Something that does strike me about this is the way that the game is clearly
More than some of the other
constructed
places. We've written
using,
more about it. There's been more references in
again,
books.
very familiar things to, for example, a D&D
Mm-hmm.
dungeon master. You know, you have the relationship between perks and damage, for example. It's written out, it's paper, it's artwork, all this sort of stuff. So that's interesting. And clearly, I mean, I think all games we know start with these sorts of concepts. I'm a big fan of collecting the art of X game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in fact,
Concept
We knew more
art
about
is
it. We had more of
always
a
amazing.
starting place, and it was
in fact, I
also-
have the Art of
we thought it was-
Skyrim
it was
book
cool
somewhere.
lore.
We'll have to
What
read
is
that
the
at some point.
tone of the game? How does the player feel about the world they're in? We're going to let you create who you want to be, so we don't want to define as much who you are as much as how do you feel about the world that you are exploring. And so for us, when we first start talking about one, is what is the tone of the world? And then everything else comes out of that.
So Matt will go off and make art and start to sort of get the look based on what Todd has said and what they talked about, and the designers, Bruce and those guys, will go off and sort of come up with the main quest and the characters, and then we just meet each week and talk about it and iterate upon it and see what works and what doesn't.
Oblivion, the last game we did in the Elder Scrolls universe, was a very core fantasy where the area it was set in,
It was.
Cyrodiil, was very much all races, all ethnicities, all
It's a big Camelot,
cultures,
really.
all, you know, it tried to be a little bit of everything. Skyrim is much more of our hardcore, like, Viking fantasy.
We sort of settled on Skyrim as
Now, obviously, let me just pause it there. Obviously, this is just basically what living in Sweden is like, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 I mean, this is just, you know,
We're having a mild winter, so there are no frost trolls down in the streets. But you know, that's why I like Skyrim so much, because it's like, you know, reliving my everyday life on a computer.
exactly. In fact, on a serious note, there has been some very interesting work done. Papers have been written about how Skyrim, in particular, represents a hyper real fantasy of Nordic life, doesn't it? And that's a very obvious thing to say. In fact, it's being admitted here in the video. But it's interesting that people are able to, people who study the sagas, people who study language and archaeology, are able to look at this game and get something out of the artist's appreciation or understanding of this stuff. So, for example, I mean, an example of this would be actually the double-sided axe here. That's not a real thing, and that's not something that really actually happened. Certainly not in the Viking Age, for example. But it's interesting that this is the sort of stuff that makes it into this game as their representation of a more barbaric. Well, frankly, even just the fact that they think of Skyrim as being Nordic and therefore more barbaric, I find that interesting. But anyway, so I'll press play.
Cyrodiil, which was very civilized in the center of the empire, and we wanted to
As you
kind
said.
of mix things up, make it rougher, less peaceful, definitely, you know, more brutal.
I mean, the dragons must be so annoying there every day.
Yeah.
Skyrim starts the way
Back-
every Elder
back home
Scrolls
in
game
Wales,
starts.
dragons are much more
You're a
friendly.
prisoner, you don't have a background. And it's
Is
sort of
the
like
dragon,
an Elder
though-
Scrolls tradition. We want the player to fill in those blanks, you know, with their own imagination.
You tried to cross the border, right? Skyrim was fine until you came along.
Elder Scrolls especially, we give you, you're a blank slate, and we've wiped your history clean, and you're free to make your story as you wish.
And in this particular case, you're being led to your execution. And the execution is interrupted by a dragon attack. And
Into the keep!
you were a criminal and you were accused of some crime, but it's like, what is this other stuff going around? There's this weird civil war going on.
He doesn't have the men.
That's not what my scouts report, sir.
And there's a lot of tension in the world, and
In Oblivion, you weren't the person that saved the world. You helped the person save the world. But we definitely knew, like, this is Skyrim, you know, the land of the barbarians. We want you to feel like the Nord hero here.
I mean, how does that make you feel? This idea of, especially, living in one of these Nordic countries. How does in the same way that I get very frustrated, for example, living in Britain and having people, especially English people, describe Scots and Welsh and Irish as being essentially hairy, wild people. And then obviously I'm a hairy person. That doesn't help. But but like, how do you get excited at this sort of prospect? Do you sort of go? It's a Because obviously there is part of me, for example, that loves the mythic version of Wales, certainly North Wales in particular. Um, did you When you hear someone talking about Scandinavia essentially in that way, what do you think about?
I mean, I think I truly kind of don't even react to it anymore. It's just like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, of course, that's your like, that's the public like all gaming and public opinion thing, but
Yeah.
it's like I just kind of assume that it's like, when you're like, oh, this person is that, and you're like, okay, you're saying that because that's the gimmick, but I'm just going to assume that you realize that we're talking about a society and
Hmm. Hmm.
nothing is that like clear cut and like no, no.
So in that sense, uh, it's a weird love-hate relationship certainly that I have with this idea of Celticism, in so much as
Hmm.
on the one hand it's a fun stereotype to play with, but
Mm,
at times though it can be detrimental to how other
yeah,
people relate to you. Um,
absolutely. And I also find it like I usually go into a conversation when someone is expressing themselves
mhm.
that way, just assuming they're kind of, that they're not that serious.
Yeah, yeah.
And if I realize that they hardcore believe that gimmick to be the truth,
Mhm, mhm.
then I get like, oh, okay, gonna
Yeah.
have to do some education here.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, that makes
Please
sense.
let me like history explain
Yeah.
Vikings to you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But the thing is, though, I should say, it obviously this is. I get that this is the fun, and they're using that as an inspiration.
Yeah, and I mean
I'm not. I don't
it's
want to be over serious, but I just thought I'd just ask, about that.
I mean all games are basically that fantasy on steroids
Yeah,
because you need them to be
yeah.
for them to be impactful.
Mhm, mhm.
I don't know how impactful Skyrim would have been with if they had gone for like a more nuanced
Mhm,
and also truthful
mhm.
like representation of Scandinavian Viking culture.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, it would have been a society like anyone else.
Well, and also as well, things like so one of the things that we identified, I think, fairly early on was this idea of building in stone.
Hmm.
Um, you wouldn't get Bleak Falls Barrow as you do
No.
here. If you were being incredibly true to the mythos. But I just find it interesting that for many people, uh, the reality of living 1,000 years ago, and the same goes in that sense for Britain, Ireland, and Scandinavia were
Hmm.
basically connected. Um, uh, the reality of living then in these places is not enough. If I think if you took a lot of people who are Viking enthusiasts and plonked them back 1,000 years ago, they'd be grimly disappointed.
Yeah.
They'd be overwhelmed by the smell, and then they'd probably be sold into slavery.
If they were useful enough. I mean, we have practically no life skills back that
No,
are
that's true.
adaptable to back then.
That's true.
It's like, oh, you can walk, great.
No, or you might find yourself sort of put in a cage as an abnormally sort of uh, just sort of smelling person. You'd probably look
Yeah.
and smell and behave very strangely. Yeah, but anyway, again, sorry, I just thought it was an interesting question. Press play. Off we go.
Now, Mother?
A dragon! I saw a dragon!
If you were to look at the PowerPoint way back in the day, dragons was number 1 on that list. We are going to do dragons in a way that you've never seen before in any RPG.
We haven't had dragons in the Elder Scrolls. We had one in Redguard, but that game is set in the past. And so there kind of becomes these mythical creatures people talk about, but you never quite see.
You know, there have been rumors of dragons coming back, and no one's really believed it because, as far as anyone knows, dragons are gone from the world. They've all been killed off, you know, hundreds of years ago. But now here's this dragon. What's that about? The Nords have this god in their pantheon, Alduin.
Alduin, who is this, I don't want to say evil, but dark god in the Elder Scrolls lore, he is a dragon.
In the ancient times, he sort of ruled over the humans in this part of the world.
Alduin's Wall is sort of a history in stone of the last time that dragons were seriously resisted by the human beings of the world. And it tells the story of how Alduin was defeated the first time.
And the prophecy goes that he will return and eat the world. Well, that's what happens in Skyrim.
And part of what is written on the wall is the player's journey, the player's destiny.
And so you start out trying to figure out, you know, what does it have to do with me? Pretty early on, you learn that you're Dragonborn, and so you're trying to figure out, what does that mean?
The Dragonborn is someone who has the soul of a dragon, and there hasn't been one in so long. People almost wonder if it's a myth.
You don't have a chance!
Dragonborn is like, that's something where it gets really kind of metaphysical, kind of, we don't want to define it too much. That's what we do want it to be.
So I just wanted to pause it here. It's weird now looking back at Todd Howard, isn't it? Because you can see the cracks. Like, this guy is kind of just floating on a wind on a bag. He's like a what's the word? A hovercraft. He's got this cushion of hot air that he floats around on. Because he's really said nothing there. But anyway.
Well, how does that work?
You show up and you start exhibiting these powers, and people are like, oh my god, could it be true? Is this the Dragonborn? Does this person have the voice, the Thume, this power of old? And if so, what does that mean?
Cool.
And what it really comes down to mean is anointed by the gods with the soul of a dragon.
This is something that, you know, once every few generations you have someone who's born with this ability. So you as the Dragonborn, you must resolve the problem with the dragons. You must find out what it is they're back here for, and you have to take this head on.
Part of it is a mystery, and then once you have the, okay, this is what's actually going on, then it takes on a more adventurous, less mysterious tone.
Like a lot of game story ideas, it comes in little fits and spurts, and it starts with something simple and starts to grow into something more elaborate, and finally you take away some of the excess and you're left with something rather clean. For us, it
The
started
people
with
trying
very
to
simple
kill you.
concept of dragons.
I just need to pause for that because I was like, how do you detect danger? The people trying to kill you. Good.
Well, actually,
Yes.
do you want to just go back through those boards a little bit? Sorry, I've gone too far back there.
Like a lot of game story ideas, it comes.
So what does a player see when they enter a room? Natural flow. Rooms can be halls. So flow was clearly integral to this. And also you can see modular elements here on the board there, which is interesting.
Little fits and spurts, and
Effective lightning, that was, or something like that.
game story ideas, it comes in little fits and spurts.
Effect. Oh, yeah, lightning utility was okay. Yeah.
And it's
Detected, undetected, caution, danger. So they're figuring out the. Oh, that's the.
I love the little space.
Yeah, but isn't that that's the way that they indicate whether or not you've been spotted, isn't it?
That you've been seen.
Yeah, on the crosshairs on the heads-up display. Yeah, cool.
It starts with something simple and
Recipe regs, I guess.
Requirements and new stats.
Oh, nice. Okay. Item name. Cool. So yeah, they're literally designing the menu system here and workbench. Okay, cool.
And finally,
Improve smithing, forging. Found weapons can be broken in something. Comp becomes the resource for smithing improvements. It requires a lot of comp to competence, I guess.
Take away
Sorry.
some of the excess you left.
There we go.
Yeah. Tell the difference between detected and danger. Duh. People trying to kill you. Yeah, that makes sense. How do I know if I've been detected?
They will try to kill you.
With something rather clean. For us, it started with a very simple concept of dragons. If we're going to do dragons, we need to do dragons.
I think they did dragons quite well in this game.
This is a big deal. This isn't something you can just, oh yeah, there's another creature like a bear walking around in the woods.
Part of our challenge was to make the dragons familiar without being 100% cliche.
We definitely like them being characters. They had a culture. They may be terrifying and they may be brutal, but they're also sentient and intelligent, and they have a language, and they can speak, and they will speak to you at times. But they also have a sort of distinct sort of Nordic flavor to them. And they're big.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted the dragon to feel very majestic, so we were looking at, well, how do eagles soar and that sort of thing. But on ground, we wanted them to be a little bit more primal and reptilian in nature.
Well, in that sense, they
is analyzing real world.
In that sense, they didn't admit that they were doing this, but in that sense, what they're describing there is two different types of monster from traditional stories at the time. So you have flying dragons and things, but also you have much more earth-based monsters like worms and things. And actually, the fact that this thing is crawling along the ground trying to get you is quite evocative. I suppose the thing I like about the way that they did dragons here is that I remember the first time I came up against dragons in Skyrim, thinking how I can't do anything about this.
I was no joke, like sneak attacked by the first dragon I ever met, like in the wild in Skyrim. I was just walking down like a cliff path, minding my own business, looking for flowers, making potions, and then I lost like 75% of my HP because I didn't pay attention to the background sounds. And when I turned around, I was face to face with a dragon. I was like, oh.
Yeah, just like, I'm eating you. Yep. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Analogs. So we'll look at bat footage. We'll look at bird footage. It's trying to research so that we're not making a fantastical creature be unbelievable. It may be a fantastical creature, but it still has to feel like it has weight. It still has to feel like it could exist in this environment.
Trying to make dragons feel authentic is, for us, more important than making them feel unique, special, and completely and utterly different. You make the experience of it feel so real.
The noise as well was very important.
The authenticity is what matters.
The sounds that they make when they shoot fire.
In the Elder Scrolls lore, the ancient Nords had this power of the Thum, the ability to shout and form these words of power. It was written then. It was never intended. This is the language of dragons. But when we started, we're going to do Skyrim, or we're going to have dragons come back. That was a pretty quick decision. It was like, that's what we always meant.
When the dragons in the game, you can hear them speaking the language. So that got us talking about, well, what does this language mean for the player? What kind of device will this be? And so we decided to create this dragon language.
Emil, I want you to write this song. That's how it started. Can you write a song that works in dragon language, that rhymes with the Elder Scrolls theme, when translated into English, also makes sense and rhymes? He's able to come up with things. I don't know how he does it.
I found recordings of Beowulf in Old English. That gave me sort of the overall feel.
It's a good place to start.
As the story goes, he kind of sat on it for a while and went home one weekend and heated up some mead and wrote the thing. He came in on Monday, there it is, and it was like, oh my gosh, this actually works.
each shout has 3 components. There are 3 words. And so it becomes like, okay, I say one word, you know, foos, and then ro, and da. And so when you're doing this as a gameplay device, it's like, it has to all meld together, like foos, ro, da.
When you say, foos, ro, da, like that, that's when the big clap of thunder, you know, should fire off in the game. And this blast of energy comes out of the player and knocks your opponent off their feet. And if it all times up just right, it feels perfect.
Sometimes I just use that to get NPCs out of my way.
Yeah, me too.
When they block you.
You have these
Or,
walls
like,
where you learn the words of power
helpers.
usually, and they
Yeah,
are these
I've
ancient
done that.
writings of the Nords who knew the language.
One of our concept artists, Adam, come up with like the visual, you know. Todd was directing him. It's like, no, it's gonna look like, you know, if the dragons had clawed it into the stone. So it's very jagged looking.
And he decided, well, all right, the dragon has this many claws. It probably uses its thumb claw as like a rotation point, and then he started sketching out different scratch patterns, and eventually that became the language.
That's so cool.
And it's something that we have observed in previous videos as well. I think there's some writing about that, isn't there? Yeah.
Skyrim's the most northern province in Tamriel, so it's the home of the Nords. It's really heavy, snow-covered mountains and this really rugged environment.
Really one of these like large, craggy features that erupt out of the ground, giving you these kind of dramatic, sheer visuals and vistas to walk and travel through.
The world is our main character. Even though you're playing somebody, we have these NPCs, we have a story, the main character of the game is the world, the province of Skyrim.
So the world in this region really defines the entire look of the game. What creatures live there and what alchemy plants grow there. So we come up with a set of foliage that grows in each region, different color palettes, different lighting, different weather, and then make sure that transitions well between the different regions, but then still fits in with the overall aesthetic of the world.
What makes our RPGs different is the amount of time we spend just building the world and thinking about, as you walk through the game, what are you going to see when you walk into town? You know, what are you going to be able to pick up? What are you going to be able to craft? What are you going to be able to eat?
All of the little things in that are what we obsess over. You could say, well, what effect does that have on gameplay? Let's not overthink it, that's just neat. But they become the key thing that makes you feel that this is all real for the moment I'm in it.
We kind of call it cluttering the world. You can go into a house and steal all the guy's mead. And, you know, that's fun. That was a game you just decided to go do.
I want to touch everything and do it.
So just and actually, do you think that's actually an aesthetic that we see in, or we have been seeing in the Tombs so far? This idea of cluttering. So
I mean, you see a lot of things that for like gameplay don't matter. But you can still like pick up all the clubs. You can take all the embalming tools. You can. I mean,
and the burned books, which are just useless,
exactly.
Really, but they're there, yeah.
And I actually think they add like the majority of the things that make Skyrim so replayable, and that it's like, what is it, 10 years later, or more? Is it more? How old are they?
2011, I think it came out.
Yeah. So okay, 9 years then.
Yeah. 11, I think. I shall check that. Continue.
Anyway, no matter how old the game is, it's still replayable, and it's still very immersive.
Yeah.
And a lot of games, like they don't age well.
No.
You can't go into the game and get that same feeling of awe that you had when you first opened it. When you go into Skyrim, you can still, at least I can, still get that awe-inspiring feeling of, this is a world, and this is a world that I feel engaged with. It feels real.
Yeah, well, and also I suppose part of the key to that, and this is where this also relates to our observations in the dungeons, is that you are, actually, as Todd said there, you are the player, you are the person who's creating their story within the world.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the strength of this sensation that the world is happening despite you. You're
Mm-hmm.
incidental to it, and you're important once you come along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's definitely powerful. And I wonder if it's interesting. I suppose I'm just interested by this use of the word cluttering. I find
Yeah.
that interesting because actually I think I don't think I would have been so I don't know. So it would have felt a little bit cruel to say they've cluttered up this dungeon, um, but actually the clutter. I suppose just looking around my office, frankly, it is cluttered, and that is
Mm-hmm.
what makes it look like a lived-in space, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I always feel like because there are other games that don't clutter
Mhm.
the areas in the same way that Elder Scrolls do,
Mhm.
and it always feels like more clinical and
Yeah.
less alive, more like
What do you
this
know?
is a dungeon and this is where I go and this is the next
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. Well, Shadow of the Tomb Raider for
Mm-hmm.
me, I loved the Rise of the Tomb Raider and the original Tomb Raider game. So the original Crystal Dynamics Tomb Raider, um, 2013, I think that was. But Shadow of the Tomb Raider felt clinical next to, for example, Zelda Breath of the Wild and also
Mm-hmm.
Skyrim, in so much as you're in this jungle, but nothing is interactable,
No,
interact withable. You can't pick
like
anything up. You can't.
only thing you can do is things that are useful for you.
Yeah, to progress the story, to
Yeah.
essentially go from down a corridor that looks like a jungle from
Mm-hmm.
A to B to yeah, and so that's definitely a strength, and I think probably uh, it'd be interesting to bear that in mind, the
Mm-hmm.
clutter in future
And stare at these bushes that have
surveys.
all been individually modeled, and what do their flowers look like? And then you can pick the flowers off, and they come off, and you can eat them, and they do things to you, and you can mix them into potions.
It makes a sense of believability to the world. So you really see how people live in it and what they're doing. And a lot of the story is just told by the clutter or the environment that is just built around that character.
There is so much stuff in the game. It is an orders of magnitude larger and has more things in it than we've ever done.
It's not enough for us just to create one large city. We're going to do 5. It's not enough for us to do a few farms or a few places of interest. We're going to do 500 hand-placed things for you to look at in the world. And we're going to keep adding. We're going to keep playing. We're going to keep adding. We're adding up until the end.
When you come out of that first dungeon and you see this huge open valley of pine trees and clouds and these giant mountains like we haven't been able to do in any previous Elder Scrolls game, that part is really special. That's kind of the first part where we're like, yeah, that's what Skyrim's all about. This big, huge, rugged, open world, and you can kind of go wherever you want in it.
I suppose the question for the continuation of the survey is going to be to what extent is more better, in terms of does it hold up to scrutiny as opposed to simply being a lot to do in the game. Oh,
Like everything else, like the plants and the people, we treat the creatures the same, that they live in this world.
Mammoths and giants. Probably
again,
the
just
coolest.
like Sweden.
And I also have to add, I agree. The thing they did with the giants and the mammoths is probably one of the coolest things, like that just exists in the world.
Yeah. Well, do you mean the relationship between the
Yeah, the
mammoth and giants?
domestication and that
Yeah.
it's like it's totally like disconnected to the story. It's just a thing that happens in Skyrim that also like affects a lot of your gameplay. At least me, because I don't like fighting giants or mammoths,
No.
especially not at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, obviously, 'cause the fact that the giants are producing, is it mammoth cheese in the big bags that they have around their camps, and uh, and you know what I found really interesting about this when I first encountered a mammoth is that I didn't question it oddly enough.
No.
Isn't that strange? In so much as I'm absolutely painfully aware that mammoth aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
And yet to see it in the game was very. It wasn't jarring. I wasn't going. This isn't 10,000 BC. That was kind of cool. But again, I guess how do you think? Do you think this is sort of the open-ended nature of that fantasy element of these sort of old northern European myths and cultures? Is this idea that actually you can tag on? I suppose if you are going to tag on dragons, why not tag on mammoth? I guess.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, if we're gonna like, I think that most like skalds in ancient Nordic like history would have been ecstatic to see Skyrim being the representation of their culture.
yeah. I suppose a little bit like I've often thought that the movie 300,
Yeah.
Spartans
The Spartans
would
would have
love
been
that. That's
so
what we think of
pleased.
them. Yeah. They'd be like, yeah, that was us.
Totally. We're so cool.
It was so cool. Yeah, and we will fight in the shade.
It's actually very close to them. You can walk up, as long as you don't get too close, you can walk up and watch them sort of move on by.
I like the mammoth graveyard as well, or graveyards that you come across.
It's not going to be pretty. They're very powerful. Some of the principal villains in the game would be the Draugr. These are sort of mindless undead creatures.
Have archers, porkers, who are these seals.
A cool one that people haven't really seen before is the Falmer. These are another type of elf in Elder Scrolls lore. In Skyrim, the idea is that they've lived underground for a long time, so long that their eyes have all grown over.
Well, in Tolkien, that's the
hag
idea.
ravens,
She's a really powerful magic user.
which are evil witches who have decided to trade some of their humanity for all kinds of evil magical powers.
One of my favorites in concept and execution are these ice wraiths.
There's a line in lore that Nords, when they come of age, will go fight an ice wraith. But we didn't really know what an ice wraith looked like. So we didn't want to do just a typical ghost specter thing. So we worked with one of the concept artists, and he had this idea for this really cool serpentine crystalline ice creature.
And they move on the wind. That's the kind of thing that feels more unique to this game. They're pretty terrifying.
It's also worthwhile noting that obviously this documentary is partly designed to sell the game as well.
Like
isn't it?
you want to make you physically, the player who bought the game, feel
So it's not
like
a
you're
completely
getting
honest
it.
record of
More
development.
So that the character on the screen that you are
I
playing
imagine they won't be like, and then we cried for 2 weeks.
Where do you draw that line? How much does it become a reflex game? I'm good at blocking at the right time versus my character's good at blocking.
Look at combat in a big way. Tried to make it more emotional and impactful and visceral.
And I think broadly speaking they succeeded.
Be moved around more rather than just be kind of static.
I mean, a lot more action-oriented, and that always presents a lot of challenges because it actually involves a lot of math and timing to make it fluid and fun, and a lot of iteration.
We did spend a lot of time just, taking a mace and hitting fake guys in the head on the screen until it, punchier. Oh, now you're going too far. It looks too silly. Okay, pull back. If we can succeed at, here comes a wolf, and I take an axe and I plant it in his head, and he dies, and I take his hide. Like, if that, just something that simple, you feel like, yeah. You feel good about it. Then when we're fighting giants or dragons, that's much easier.
I might switch the camera move on this one, though.
And we looked at the visual experience. The visual experience for us needed to be more immediate, needed to be more like I'm there in the world.
For certain kill moves, you're going to see that the camera's going to slow down, pop into third person.
I love that it does that.
There's a lot of fun.
I think you're bleeding.
Going to some cinematic perspective quickly and watching your character do something really cool.
We wanted you to be able to see the sword shove through their torso and come out the back like I'm being a real badass. Like I'm going to slaughter people, creatures, whatever is out there. I'm going to slaughter it.
Tim Lamb had my favorite name for it, which was Violens. Cinekill was the other one. So we've had all these different names. I mean, any month there was a different name. So I think this month's name is Kill Cam, and I don't think we'll change it. We're getting toward the end.
Yeah, Kill Cam sounds a bit like a snuff film, doesn't it?
The wizard, he's dual wielding.
No, actually, sorry, just a sec. This is an element of the game design that I find interesting. Is this idea of the relationship between being cool, feeling cool, and I'm going to slaughter everything. That's a strange sentence to use, isn't it? I understand it's hyperbole, and I don't get me wrong. I'm not being prudish. It's a computer game, and it is fun to go out and just be invincible. But it's interesting that that's a part of the design ethos. Presumably that also plays into, for example, the tombs as well. As you go in, they're not wanting you to. There's going to be a balance between challenge and having that sense of being able to.
I mean, that's. I think that all boils down to challenge and reward. For a game to be fun, I can just draw upon my own tabletop experience. It doesn't matter how cool the end, like the final boss is, if your players won't have a good time and feel cool while going at it. Or like on the path to that boss. So you have to make these smaller challenges. Like you have to make smaller challenges so they have something to do, and so you can build up the feeling also of being like that. It's realistic that you can take on a big dragon.
No, I think so. I think some of the worst D&D experiences I've ever had has just been when the DM essentially sees it as their duty just to murder you.
Yeah.
You know, and just like ha 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 ha. You know, here's this. Try and kill this, and you sort of you have no confidence in your ability in that sense. Yeah.
Or even worse for me is when I feel like I have this cool character. I have the stats to do cool things, but the DM is so preoccupied with with murdering you, or like making you so you feel that you don't get a chance to like be that awesome, that like you're like I could do all of these things, but I can't because I'm always tapped. Or nothing that like everything that comes at me is always a challenge raining too hard.
And actually, I suppose this answers my question as well, in so much as the other thing as well is that you don't always want the DM, or in this case the game, to be presenting you with deep character-defining interactions. Doesn't always have to be what does it mean to kill? In that sense, it's okay to get to present a progression of different experiences, and some of those experiences are designed to make the character, you as playing the Dragonborn feel that I suppose that you want to keep on playing at a basic level, that you want to keep on doing this. So okay. I just thought I'd just take a moment just to think about that, because it was very pointed. I can slaughter everyone. That's okay. No, fair enough.
The key to combat in Skyrim is being able to wield weapons and spells in both hands. So that's a new thing for us.
One of our big mantras going into the game is you are who you play. And a lot of that is, what are you going to put in your hands?
Dual wielding now means I can have a spell in this hand and a sword in this hand. Or I can have a spell in this hand and the same spell in this hand. And what does that do? Oh, guess what? It does something even more powerful. And so that all plays into how the combat plays out.
So this is the final state where like the beams fade away.
And then this was the current test of the skull corruption cast. Basically, I've hidden the projectile.
It's too bad we don't do more of this burning stuff.
Really? 10,000 times more than Oblivion already.
The whole dual controller thing we're doing came from the initial magic design.
With the spells, we knew immediately from the beginning we wanted to get something that was more of a wizard duel rather than just, you know, can I throw fireballs quicker than you can throw fireballs? Could we make it actually feel like something?
So we wanted to be able to have two magic guys go at it, you know, in a really good, strategic, fun, and exciting way, like we can do with melee combat. We've also added new ways for the spells to be delivered.
So the way we treat fire now is it hits and it spreads, and it can spread a bit and do damage, and you can actually just take your fire spell and lay it on the ground, let guys run through it.
And we really spent a lot of time, focusing on magic this game, just a ton more effort into, all the unique spells and their visuals.
The area effect is in, the casting art is in. With the magic system added to the mix here in Skyrim, almost a third of the gameplay is involving special effects being thrown at people.
That's what I always imagined this room to be like, especially when the wizards start going with their spells.
Forget the numbers and how much it kills guys. A lot of times you find a new spell and no one's around, you set it off.
Yeah, what spell's that, I wonder?
Your damage resistance is determined by your armor and your perks and other stuff that might fold into that. So in this case, admittedly, the player will have to trust that we are doing what we say we are doing. We've always been very big in the Elder Scrolls on dynamic growth of the character. Every single one of our games in the series has had this idea that when you do something, you get better at it.
In Skyrim, the game adapts to what you're doing. That was one of the reasons why we got rid of classes.
You won't leave Skyrim alive!
And you decide what your character is just by going out and doing that stuff.
Which is something I did appreciate. I have to say, I first played Skyrim, and then I went and played Oblivion briefly. Going backwards feels terrible.
Yeah.
Because the way that all the enemies scale with you, so you don't get that sense of becoming more powerful, which also partly answers the question I was asking just before. But also as well, this idea of going out and doing. There was an element of that in Oblivion, but in this game, you see your experience ramping up, and actually, it makes you want to do things like working on
suddenly you
metalworking.
spend like a week at a forge just because you need to up your skill.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
I need this armor. I need to make it myself.
Using and whether you do any damage, you're going to get a certain amount of skill usage, and then that's going to build up until you reach that threshold, and then your skill will increase. At that point, once you've increased enough skills, then you level up.
Same thing with wizardry. Start casting spells, you'll get better at casting spells. So in an ideal environment, you don't have to think about what it is you're trying to do. You're not watching to see, oh, how can I make my character do this or that? You just play. And the game responds. The game responds by letting you become those things.
Every time you level up, you get to pick a perk. And the perks are what really defines your character. The definition of what a perk is really kind of hard to nail down. It's a advantage or a feature or a gameplay enhancement or an ability or feat that you get as you progress in your skills.
You can actually play the game for a while as a warrior character and then decide, I want to start doing magic stuff. And in the previous games, if you really wanted to do that, you probably wanted to start over.
Yeah.
Well, in Skyrim, you can start doing it and you suck at it at first. And then eventually it starts affecting you more, and then you can make up that ground without throwing away however many hours of gameplay you've already done.
In Skyrim, we like to say we are what you play, and it sounds like a catchphrase or whatever, but it really is true.
Who do you want to be? The game is going to have some outlet for that. So on some level...
So all of this stuff isn't strictly related to our survey, but it's interesting.
Great to see, and I think it's, I mean, knowing the intention behind the game will help you guys who are watching this with us not have to listen to us speculate about what they wanted anymore, or as much anyway.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like having a couple of old legionnaires living in his town.
Because now
Be
we know.
responsive to things the player does. When you do something in the
Well,
game, we want the
in
game
it,
to recognize it.
So in a nutshell, it seems to be make it cool and make it intuitive.
Yeah.
You know,
Which
okay.
is a great thing for a game.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I want all my games to be cool and intuitive.
Did I see you talking to Sven? Maybe not. Maybe. Never mind. But I would stay away from him if I were you.
How does that AI tie into a story? Like, how do I get quests from them? How do they become my friends? What will they do for me? What can I do for them? That kind of stuff.
Sometimes it's as simple as having a guard in a city comment on the things that you've done.
Get your thieving hands off that! Off to Bleak Falls Barrow with you. The Jarl is not a patient man.
The game has now responded to something you've done in a way that makes sense and feels like the natural world.
You have no idea how much data is in this game. Here are some staggering numbers. There are 31 quests in Fallout 3. In Skyrim, there's 244 of these. Things like collecting dog tags, delivering...
Sorry, there are 31 quests in Fallout 3.
Yeah.
That's crackers. Wow.
Things that we do as objectives right
Only
now.
31.
And a lot of these repeat because they're radiant. The game is insanely big.
Every Elder Scrolls game has its main quest, and the main quest in Skyrim is unraveling the mystery of the Dragonborn, and so that is definitely your heroic path.
I think I found someone who can help you with your dragon project.
For us, when we make a good story, we know we've done it when the player is the agent.
Yes, I could use someone to fetch something for me. Well, when I say fetch, I really mean delve into a dangerous ruin in search of an ancient stone tablet.
If we pose an
Sign me up.
interesting problem,
I
and
love
we let
him.
the player solve it in whatever way he deems fit, that's going to make the cool, interesting story.
If you decide not to do the main quest, there are different quest lines.
My favorite quest line is the Dark Brotherhood quest line. The Dark Brotherhood is the Assassin's Guild. They do the secret ritual ceremony to summon the Dark Brotherhood. And when you join the Dark Brotherhood, you're one of the guys who shows up and goes, who do you need killed? What do you need? I just think that's just really awesome.
I'm yet to
The game sort of offers
do
this
that.
sort of redemption, where okay, I'm going to play as a bad guy and do all this bad stuff. I'm going to
It's
join
a
the Dark
really
Brotherhood
good quest line.
maybe
can imagine.
join the Thieves Guild and do scummy stuff. You know what? Then I'm going to do the main quest, which is more honorable. And then because you're put in these situations where you're sort of the good guy, you start to feel like that.
Or not.
The big transition in our studio from Oblivion to Skyrim is we never actually had dedicated level designers in Oblivion. We had them
here
in
we go.
Fallout, now we have them in Skyrim. And what that means is that when you go into a cave, it's not just art and stuff.
Get me down! It's coming loose. I can feel it.
And before we did it in a very compartmentalized way, and you would see lots of the same rooms, but we took it a step further this time and made a whole bunch of free pieces so that every single dungeon is a completely different experience.
You fool! Why should I share the treasure with anyone?
In total, we have around 310 or 15 spaces. That includes dungeons, large dungeons, small dungeons, exterior play spaces.
Our sort of ideal now is that we want every dungeon in a game like ours to be as good as a fully scripted level, something in like a highly authored game.
Every dungeon's going to tell some sort of story, whether visually or through notes or books or the loot.
You might actually get like literally a quest. It starts up, it's put in your journal. In some cases, it's more of a free form. You know, you follow clues or you just learn the story of the dungeon by playing through it.
The implied stories to me are the ones that are some of the most interesting because there's not a word of dialogue spoken. There's just the environment speaking to you. So you go in, you see a body laying on its back with an empty bottle clasped in its claw and bottles in its mouth. He's just laying there.
We really want to have this memorable moment. We want to have the players who played the dungeon or the level to come back being like, that was an awesome experience. When I came into that last room and I saw the sky shining down from above and this cool little set piece with the streams going through and then the boss comes out, that was really cool. So that was the one thing I always ask the LDs after they're finished past 1 or past 2 of a dungeon. Like, so, you know, what's your memorable moment?
Every time you play, you're gonna find something neat or something different's gonna happen.
Games are such a unique storytelling device is that you have this really opportunity to tell a story through action, through gameplay.
And so in that case, I suppose that does vindicate, in that sense, our approach in terms of seeing each dungeon as
their own.
well, as their own, yeah, and also as a um, I suppose as a narrative thing. It's not really a story, but but this idea of having this idea, even unspoken dialogue. I mean, that is essentially archaeology. Um, it's and and do you think then that obviously they're using words like cool and memorable moments, uh, but I suppose that's again that's fine. That's a goal of game making, um, and it's
And
true.
it's also a goal of storytelling.
Yeah.
Like legends don't become legends unless they're cool.
No, no, that's true. That's very true. Yeah, yeah, and also I suppose in that sense, uh, I absolutely when I go back into these dungeons, I absolutely go, oh, this is the one with the or where this happened or with that person or so, yeah. So you remember, yeah. Okay, so to be memorable is part of the goal. Yeah.
Character animation is something we really wanted to improve upon from our previous games.
There are thousands of
pause it for a
animations.
sec, and they also, I suppose, they also hinted at this modular notion. Obviously, Liv can't see what I'm showing as on screen at the moment, but this idea of having, well, actually, in Joel's blog post, he initially uses the analogy of different plumbing parts, and having a kit that helps you to put these things together. Again, it's well worth a read. And I suppose the fact that we're starting to see that as we're starting to recognise the different plumbing parts, so far hasn't I've it hasn't compromised the experience of going into the tombs for me.
And I would also say that if you compare having that method compared to, let's take Dragon Age 2 as an example. I don't know if you have played that.
No, I haven't.
No. There you have the very frustrating experience of about halfway through the game, you realize, I've been in this dungeon before. Because they've reused like 10 or 15 dungeons.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the reason why I hadn't played it. I'd heard bad things in that sense.
You should play it for the story. The story and like the characters are amazing, but that level design feels so lazy, especially compared to Skyrim. And other games like Skyrim, where you're like, we have 300 dungeons and none of them is exactly the same as another.
Well, and I guess one of the ways to quickly achieve that, to allow the dungeon maker, the storyteller for that dungeon to achieve that, is to give them a set of plumbing parts that they can plug together. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
For the players and NPCs alone, not to mention all of the animations for all the creatures.
The challenge to making a character in the game, an NPC, feel like they're real, like they're really there, is a tough nut. And part of that is because you and I see people every day. We are intimately versed in what a real person is. This is not a mystery to us. I have no idea what an undead guy is like. So what I need to do to make him feel convincing pales in comparison to what I need to make a person feel convincing.
I've got a good feeling about you, and I don't often get good feelings about anything. A warrior knows to trust her gut.
Despite advances in our technology,
sounds a bit like you.
Growth in the animation team, our own
I often get good things about anything.
I am offended.
That time to get even a simple character longer than it has in past projects.
The biggest challenge, I would say, is to create a pretty wide-ranging assortment of characters and yet keep them within a normal realm, using as few assets as possible and dealing with any kind of technical issues. It was definitely quite a challenge. The fun times we have are usually the mocap sessions. So you're gonna be the stabby. I typically put Dennis through some pretty painful posing and whatnot, so the next day he'll have like a tough time like moving around. Mocap ready, and action. One of the things that we do a lot is kind of leave like messages and pranks on each other. Rick killed me yesterday, you know, that mocap session was too much. And action.
I suppose this is interesting as well in so much as it highlights that the scale of the game is directly related to bodies. That's a principle that actually I've touched on in a previous video about phenomenology in Skyrim. But it's interesting that the animations are so tied to people as opposed to someone moving a puppet like a sculpture or something.
Yeah. And I like mocap have done so much for video games in general when it comes to immersion, I would say.
Yeah.
I think the best NPCs, you can tell a lot about them from the voiceover.
I've been thinking, maybe Camilla needs a little help seeing Sven for what he is.
That little bit of writing and how they say hello is, I think, like one of the hardest things to do.
Only thing better than riding a swift horse is riding a swift horse over the enemy.
You know, in Oblivion, we had like 12 actors, and that was one of the complaints is you walk in Oblivion and you hear a lot of the same voices. So for Skyrim, we want to definitely improve on that dramatically, and we're talking dramatically, like night and day.
Everyone thinks I'm too young to be a ship's captain, but I'm going to prove them wrong.
And in this game, we have 70 plus actors doing over 110 roles. A lot more than we've ever had.
It's interesting how that voice I don't think matched that
4 or
captain
5
at all.
weeks, 3 voice studios working simultaneously.
Let's see if we can get people trying a quote-unquote Nordic accent. You've come all the way to Skyrim. You're at the tip of the continent here. The guys are big and burly and have beards. The women are big and burly and have beards. And
you have beards?
And it's a fine line of what sounds good and what sounds like ridiculous.
And so we spend a lot of time casting. We have some great actors.
Some of the more specific names we have on here: Max von Sydow, Joan Allen, Linda Carter,
Christopher Plummer, who I've wanted to put in a game forever.
You know the ancient Nord word for war? Season unending. And so it has proved.
They were perfect for the part to begin with, and I think everybody had a really good time.
Thank you, sir. And now 22, we're moving on to a different...
They bring a resonance to their roles when they talk that you can write like the cheesiest line, and wow, that sounds great coming out of his mouth.
Begone! Before even my philosophy has tested me on the breaking point. We are men of peace, and you are not.
Is that if you do something wrong in the Greybeard's Hall, presumably? Yeah.
Oh, I agree. Like comparing Skyrim to Oblivion. I mean, I'm going to be honest with everyone. I never finished Oblivion.
Neither did I, to be honest. I got fed up with repeating the...
because
yeah.
I think I played like 4 hours at most. Because one, I couldn't stand like the communication system. The whole minigame thing. I was like, no, I just want to talk to people. Stop making me try to figure this out. And also, like, the thing that everyone sounded the same, it breaks immersion in a very quick way for me.
Well, isn't there famously a bit of dialogue in Oblivion where the actress, they kept in her going, "Oh, I said that wrong. I'll say it like this." By accident, they sort of it was a bit, so that totally broke immersion. But yeah, definitely, yeah. But the thing is, I suppose related to that, are you the sort of person who would go into? Because I've never heard Christopher Plummer saying that in the game. But would you go into, say, High Hrothgar and trash the place just to stretch and test the boundaries of what's
No,
possible.
no, but I have been known to use my insanely high sneak to just eavesdrop on NPC conversation.
Oh, okay.
Because I want to know what they say when I'm not around.
And okay, and has that led to interesting and surprising things, or?
Yeah, I mean, when you walk through a city, I mean, the NPCs, the speech is obviously triggered for when you as a player comes near.
Yeah.
But it's also the kind of thing where you can sneak up on people and like listen in on like guards and stuff. It's especially fun in dungeons.
Okay.
When you have a bandit camp and you know you're about to murder them.
you know when you're, but you know that feeling.
Yes. Sometimes you can sneak through the whole dungeon and just, take the thing and go out and don't murder anyone. But sometimes, but you can hear them talking while you're like sitting perched up somewhere, and it feels so real. Because, people talk even though I'm not around.
Yeah.
I've been told anyway.
Yeah. Oh, do they?
Yeah, I think so.
So the world exists.
Well, I can't prove that, but that's another discussion.
It's an interesting concept. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And also that I think that, as you say, that it does tie into NPCs and enemies in dungeons, but also I like the way that that's been hinted at in what we've discovered so far in terms of the observed behavior of the Draugr, for example. The idea that they have these shifts that they work. Interestingly, though, I think I'm yet to see any evidence that they actually modelled that into the game in so much as.
No, I don't think. I think it's just a narrative thing.
Yeah.
But it's a great narrative.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, on we go.
So any questions on the pronunciation?
Oh, this is going to be all about the choir.
Let's try it.
The choir is great.
To be honest, this is probably my favourite part of this game is the soundtrack.
The music for
so I'm more
Skyrim
than happy to
would
watch this.
be the Elder Scrolls theme, but sung by a barbarian choir.
What is a barbarian
so
choir?
Jeremy Soule, who does our
This
music.
apparently.
2006.
They look quite civilized to
the
me.
Elder Scrolls theme is sung by a barbarian choir.
But I doubt they speak Greece.
How are we gonna do that? I don't know.
Some of them
What are
might.
they singing? They're singing this song in the dragon language to the theme of Elder Scrolls.
Or do you want a solid break right here?
Let's go ahead and carry it.
His work on the main theme of the game set the tone for the rest of it. And eventually we went out to Los Angeles to Sony's scoring stage, and then had just a fantastic choir and choir director.
Settle.
And the choir was only made up of about 30 people.
Sounds so good.
And the choir director would kind of whip them up into more of a frenzy, emphasizing this Nordic feel the whole time. So they're dun 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 dun. You really pound on every downbeat. And what they would do is just do 3 passes on each verse of the song. Now you've got the sound of 90 people singing this thing in this massive hall. You take a break from it, and you come back, you still get the hairs raising on your neck every time they come to the big chorus.
Very good.
We don't script the music too heavily to where we're trying to match every moment that the player is doing or anything like that. And it has a weird way of justifying itself to you. You feel like this big sweeping score as I'm rounding this bend and seeing this mountainous valley view is playing for you.
That's very Monty Python. There's a good orchestra following you around.
Satisfying about pulling out a sword with no sound. We kind of debated for a while on whether to try to make them realistic. I tried it. I want people to know that I did try it. Swords don't make that sound. So I very quickly drifted back to the more Hollywood style. Because people want to hear it. I actually really enjoy making things that just feel very visceral and great impacts of the sword and shield and that sort of thing. So I really have a hard time with magic, actually.
So do you think that that's you know, with this question of the game as an artifact, that is essentially what this artifact is. It is obviously a plaything, but it's crucially it's designed to elicit a fun, pleasing emotion that you want to return to. I mean, I mean, as you were saying before, you do return to, don't you?
I mean, I would say that I would assume that that is what every game is going for, because you want replay value.
Yeah.
But I would say that Skyrim has succeeded far better than most games.
Well, frankly, other Bethesda games actually as well.
Absolutely.
You know, Fallout 4 obviously being an infamous.
Or 76.
Or 70. Oh, yeah, 70. Yeah. Well, see, and this is the thing, because I mean, just briefly, looking at some of the things that they're talking about here, and also having seen and heard so much about 76, it makes me wonder: are they going to be able to top Skyrim with Elder Scrolls 6? If that's me, in terms of, so for example, the stuff that's drawn us to the game in this capacity, in terms of the world building and exploring the dungeons, but also, yeah, the relatively rich integrity that they seem to have brought to it in terms of the soundscape and the characterization and so on. So,
I mean,
I don't know. I suppose hopefully they haven't completely lost it. I guess in recent.
No, I mean, I think it's one of those things that can be. I mean, the competence is somewhere. I mean, people made Skyrim.
Yeah, yeah.
It can be recreated. It's not. It's not a holy grail that vanishes and never returns. I think it's just a question about work culture and what they're allowed to do and what to focus in. I mean, the focus here seems to have been, we're gonna make cool game.
Yeah. Well, and also it's been seemingly approached with integrity. Again, I mean, I find myself slightly dismissive of Todd Howard's bluster, but the thinking and the feeling behind it is that they wanted to make something that they could be proud of, as opposed to something that simply would sell well. And I can't help but wonder whether Skyrim as an experience led to 76 in so much as they realized if we make something, people will buy lots of it, you know, as opposed to with Skyrim, they were wanting to expand on the previous Morrowind, etc. Yeah, exactly, and taking the idea of a dragon and realizing it, and so I get integrity, I guess. I suppose is the word I would hope that they relearn.
And so I have a hard time with those. I just try version after version, and chances are the one you hear in the game is the last one I did before we ran out of time.
I mean, the logistics of putting this stuff together
Our
must be
games are
incredible.
pretty long. They're like 3 to 4 year development cycles. It does feel like we've been working on it for 20 years, to be honest. It takes a long time to make the game.
Today I'm hoping to get to some creature balance. We're going to start on some wizard stuff.
We have the wonderful luxury of being able to take people who've worked with everything we've worked with, who know the kinds of things we want to do, and just start immediately.
You're working with guys who know you and know your strengths and your weaknesses, and you bicker with them and you share laughs with them, and at the end of the day, as long as you make a great game, that's all that matters.
You know, I don't know if everybody knows, but the artists, the world artists, did finish, you know, end of June, nav meshing the entire world.
Every time I sit down with a meeting with them, every now and then I have to remind myself, I'm like, hey, I'm talking to Todd Howard. He's a pretty cool guy.
Todd is very clear on what he wants. He'll walk into a room where we've been working on something and say, nope, should have been like this, or do it like this, or that's just right, instantly.
If you enter his office, no matter what the problem is or whatever, as soon as you leave, he'll make you feel like $1 million.
He doesn't come out every week and beat you over the head with a 2x4. He's like, you're not working hard enough. He just does that every other week.
All of those things that we liked growing up and the melding of technology and art. Video games, I think, are the ultimate melding of those art forms. Because if you look at a film, they can spend hours rendering one frame, and who cares? And, okay, do that 30 times a second. That's a much trickier problem. And make it fun when I push the buttons. I find that really interesting problem to solve every day.
The beauty of making an open world game is you can choose your entertainment to be what you want it to be. And therefore you will be entertained and I'll be happy.
I want to give them a game that they're going to hold on to for years and say, I'm going to keep playing this because it's that good and it keeps me in the world.
There are no accidents in a game like this. The player is free to interpret everything on their own. It's almost existential in a way.
Should I kill that guy because he has some good armor and some treasure I want? How would I feel about killing that guy? That's kind of the holy grail.
Forget that it's a video game, but this is an entertainment experience of virtually unlimited possibility, where it's there for you to take it where you want to go. And as you do those things, it will surprise you and reward you for what you're doing.
It does make me want to go back and play Skyrim now, actually. just go and be a different character, go and try. Actually, something I never do is I never really play Skyrim in an outrageous way.
My best tip for that, try playing Skyrim bare knuckled, no weapons.
Bare knuckled, okay, interesting. How? What about the hag ravens and?
It's hard.
Okay, interesting. Well, I mean, one of the things that I did on my second playthrough with Skyrim was I deliberately played it without fast travel. And actually, in the act of walking everywhere, the narrative unfolds in very interesting ways. But also, crucially, you're constantly distracted. You're like, I'm going to go over there. Oh no, I'm going to go over here. Oh no, oh what's this? I think that was worthwhile watching. It wasn't quite as in depth as I would have hoped, but I think it's together with the blog post, and we'll put the link to Joel Burgess's blog below. It adds up to something interesting, and I think it's also worthwhile seeing and hearing that as I say, that sense of integrity, because I think it makes me even more inclined to try to appreciate the artifact as a collection of plumbing parts, but also at the same time not look for the seams, not look for the repetition too much, because actually they've done so far a very good job in our surveys of hiding the repetition.
Yeah.
And that's presumably down to how customizable those plumbing parts are. So clearly, there are things that repeat, switches or wooden elements or patterns on walls, but how they're able to put them together in creative ways that tell stories, I think so far has been successful. Yeah. I suppose finally, is this the sort of thing that you would want to do with your time, designing this sort of stuff?
Yes, I mean I do sometimes. Not in a video game capacity, but yes, I wouldn't mind working with games. But no, it's fascinating, and I just love the creative process of having something and wanting others to explore it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's funny. I can see where you come from. In so much as whenever I'm, for example, in a RPG, tabletop RPG kind of thing, pen and
Mhm.
paper, I'll often have an idea that's often actually sometimes I'm trying to share a feeling or a sensation that I had, for example, exploring I don't know, the mountain forest opposite my house as a
Mhm.
child, and I'll go, oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, I remember what it was like going into that cave and realizing that that there's a lake that goes under the mountain, which
Mhm.
is a real thing actually. I never was never brave enough to go all the way into the, because apparently the people had died doing it. but knowing that that was there was very powerful, and so that it's funny
Mhm.
how those things come back to you, and then you want to share them with people. Um, well, okay, cool. I suppose on that note, thank you for watching and or listening to this, folks. We will continue to share our adventures in this survey, and I suppose at some point it could be interesting as well to go back and look at the Skyrim art book.
Yes.
We'll have to try and figure out another mechanism for that so that I can show you the book but actually at the very least,
5 different video cameras.
yeah, I think so. I think so. It's going to have to be some sort of stream that Liv can see and that we can capture. But this has been fun, and also actually a little change of pace as well,
Mhm.
and something I think that hopefully will bear fruit because it's going to be interesting, especially obviously the next survey that we do,
Mhm.
bearing this in mind. I think is going to be an intriguing thing, but we will see what happens. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care, and also please do feel free to suggest surveys in the comments below. We're always looking for new sites to take a look at. Thank you, Liv, as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.